We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to the Mankind Podcast, the show we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. This is also the place where men can take their masks off, get away from the media's magnifying glass, and connect, have real conversations, and learn tools that we can integrate into our lives. All in all, so that we can just be better men. Better men for those around us, better men for those that are different than us. If you want to be an agent of change and an ally to progress, you've come to the right place. Now we're at episode 49 of this show. I can't believe we're just about to hit 50. And what better way to near and round out this first 50 episodes of the show than with one of my favorite authors on this planet, Douglas Gillette. Now, if you've been in the men's mental health space or around men's work, you'll know about the masculine archetypes, king, warrior, magician, lover. Well, Douglas himself, along with his co-author, Robert Moore, wrote the book on it. The book titled King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, which pretty much breaks down the age-old concepts of masculinity using a Jungian lens. And they make the argument that mature masculinity is not abusive or domineering, right? Not what we're seeing it portrayed as today, but generative and creative and empowering of the self and others. Now, as much as my ambition wanted me to not only dive into the archetypes with Doug today, but really dive into the importance of ritual and rites of passage. You see, in their book, they start off by talking about the importance of initiatory experiences for young boys to enter into manhood, right? For the proper psychological experience where boys are able to kind of shed that boy psychology and that boy persona so they can enter into mature masculinity. Yet today we don't see that. Right? Not a lot in our leaders. I dare say that there are a bunch of little boys in grown man's skin leading the world right now, and they're hurting it, and they're hurting us. And so I feel like what we need is a proper initiation into life, a proper initiation into manhood. And that's why I'm grateful to be a part of an organization like the Mankind Project, where we've been doing these for 36 years. Excited to have them back in person in the very near future. But back to Doug Gillette. This interview, gosh, I feel like I could have sat down for a whole day, perhaps even a week, just to pick his brain. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity for you to hear our discussion around the importance of initiation. Why have we separated from such an integral part of growing up? That's all a part of our history. And we also dive into the differences between, the hunter-gatherer lifestyle in which these initiations were necessary for survival. And how, is there any relevance today as to why we would need initiation, right? The environment's changed. Nature has changed around us. And so if you've wondered any of these questions, and if you've wondered yourself about what it means to truly initiate into manhood, and you may not be feeling satisfied by the fraternity you hazed into or the gangs that you might have been a part of growing up, then perhaps it's time to listen in and enjoy this conversation with Jungian analyst and all-round solid good bloke, Douglas Gillette. Enjoy. Doug Gillette, my friend, it is an absolute honor and pleasure to have you join us today. This is something that when the opportunity presented itself, I just jumped at, because your writings and the work you've been involved in has had a huge impact on my journey in men's work and especially my growth as a young man. So just grateful to have you here. For those that aren't aware of you and your work, please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Doug Gillette, co-author with Robert Moore of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And then we call them the Within books that followed that: the King Within, the Warrior Within, the Magician Within, the Lover Within. I have a very wide-ranging background, master's degree from the University of Chicago Divinity School, specializing in religion and literature. an MDiv from Chicago Theological Seminary, emphasis on religion and psychology. That's where I got to know Robert. And I'm a retired pastor. And I've been teaching in the emeritus program at Oakton College in Skokie, Illinois for 18 years. So anyway, basically history of thought classes. I can teach anything I want to, and I don't have to grade the students. So I'm very happy about that. Have very few behavioral problems because the people are all in their 80s and 90s. So that's fun. Married, one daughter, 25, making her way in the world. Very happily married for 26 years.
Wow.
To a Mexican woman. The story of how we got together is unbelievable. But we can talk about that some other time or not. I'm 73, and I'm ready to begin. Is that good enough introduction?
Mate, that was almost like an eHarmony dating profile. We got all the details.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you what, let's just jump into it because, I first read your book back in 2016 when I got into men's work, specifically King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And, in our men's groups, especially the ones I was a part of, what we call I groups in the Mankind Project, we would use the archetypes as different rounds as we would go through, the group of men that were present. And so as I was getting introduced to these different energies, I wanted to learn more. So I read your book. Interestingly enough, in preparation for this interview, I picked it up again to give it a read. And it just blew my mind about the pertinence of those writings today.
Yeah.
Like the context today. I mean, I didn't know what patriarchy was, until a year ago, maybe 2 years before that. And here you are writing about it in 1990. What was published then, but here you are talking about it and talking about all these different concepts in what has led what I've referred to as little boys in grown men's skin leading the world that we see today.
Could I say something there?
Absolutely.
The book continues, believe it or not, 30 years later, it's still number 8, I'm told, on the gender studies, in that section of readership. And we just keep selling foreign rights. I mean, it is in every major language except the indigenous languages of India and get this, France. I think that the latter is because the French, this is a joke, but can't imagine that anything of value would come out of the English-speaking world,
especially the United States.
Especially the United States. And the further we go in American history, the more I tend to agree with them. But at any rate, I mean, the book is in it's in Russian, it's in German, it's in Arabic, it's in Hebrew, it's in Greek, it's in Portuguese, it's in Spanish, and it's just Czech. And we just recently sold the rights to Vietnamese.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's this potential that I'm very excited about, that what Robert and I did back in the late 80s, published in 1990, the potential there for moving the needle on manhood from basically technologically sophisticated barbarians to something approaching humaneness.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that.
Well, I think that, the book was released in a way, kind of riding the wave of a very emerging kind of movement, right? For
Right.
men. I mean, this is again the early days of the Mankind Project as well, and in other organizations, you got like the Sterling, you got all these different kind of factions, and I just think I'm not surprised that the book is continuing to gain those rights and being translated into all these different languages because of the relevance that is clearly transcending time. So I want to kick things off. Speaking of time, there's a really powerful teaching that we use in our weekends that talks about, kind of really just gives the context to initiation, and how in previous times we had tribal elders that would, take the boys and take them through a rite of passage where in essence, a part of them would die, right? That would be it'd be a needed transition into manhood. I know the indigenous Australians in some of the tribes, they would send their youngsters 14 years old, sometimes 12 years old, 2 weeks with a spear and a loincloth. And it's, hey, survive, figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And oftentimes, right, these young boys were scarred or marred with something to represent that transition. So to me, that speaks about the importance of rituals and rites of passage. Yet today we have these pseudo initiations that you and Robert talk about in the book. We're talking about, joining a gang. We're talking about fraternities. I'm sure fraternities have their place in certain contexts, but I'm more talking about, we have a lot of young kids dying in fraternities because of silly rituals that are in place. So I'm curious, at what stage in history did we abandon these rituals and these rites of passage for these pseudo initiations? Is this just a recent thing in the previous century, or has this been happening longer than that?
No, I think it's been coming on for a long time. The people you're talking about, the Australian Aborigines, but all the primal peoples, Native Americans, and so on, Africans, the Siberian shaman cultures, and even up through early stages of agricultural revolution, 8,000, 9,000 years ago, maybe 10,000 years ago. But I think really that the most powerful rituals of initiation took place predominantly in traditional peoples or primal peoples. In other words, the hunter-gatherer types who were even more than the agriculturalists, the farmers and herders. Primal peoples were right up against nature.
Yeah.
And there's something about that, that immediate and intimate and existential interface that I think generated this need in human beings, women too, but they had a different role in those societies, but certainly men, to confront that, to deal with the existential threat right in your face. Civilization, including agriculture in the early settlements of thousands of years ago, I think civilization has accurately been characterized as our defense against nature. Cities exist in order to protect us from nature.
Yeah.
Okay, and we are nature, but we and other living things too need to be protected from nature as well as be nurtured by it. Yeah. So I think the further we got from that immediate existential life situation, I think that rituals of initiation began to taper off. And with the rise of the mostly current, but some past spiritual systems, it dwindled even further, because Karl Jaspers, the philosopher, talked about the axial age, in which in which human beings, more or less all around the world, and his dates are a little artificial, but basically somewhere between about 600 BCE and 600 CE, human beings, the thinking human beings, already, for the most part, or to a large extent, urbanized and alienated from nature, began to think abstractly about realms beyond nature and separating from nature completely spiritually.
Right.
Hence, Hinduism, Buddhism, mystical, and not Christianity, Judaism, Islam, etc. So anyway, what I'm saying is that we have progressively, really, since hunter-gatherer days, detached from the natural context in which there was an existential need to turn, as long as we're talking about men, boys into men, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. So if the environment has changed,
Yeah,
right, we're no longer up like in symbiosis or in a dance with nature, right? Because the hunter-gatherers weren't trying to control nature. They were trying to be symbiotic with it or survive, really, more than anything. So if the environment has changed, if we're no longer faced or forced to face nature like that, is the need or requirement for initiation necessary today anymore?
Well, I think it is, because I think that we were evolved to be simultaneously in nature and outside of it in a certain way. And the initiations that you're referring to, I think, I mean, they had several different goals, but one goal was to awaken the boy to the realization that he walks with one foot in this world and one foot in another world. Not both feet, in one world or the other.
Sure.
We are the beings that have to straddle whatever dividing line there is between nature and supernature. And that's just the way we're built. Where was I going with that? The thing is, as we progressively, in my view, as we progressively detached from nature, we no longer tried to integrate nature with supernature or the material with the spiritual. We eventually, most people, just erased the spiritual and we're left with the material. But it was a material divorced from nature as far as possible. In other words, stuff. And if you live for stuff, you are missing not only the spiritual, the supernature, but you're missing supernature within nature, and you're missing nature itself.
So when you're talking
stuff is not nature.
Right. So when you're talking supernature, you're essentially whatever someone's relation is to said supernature.
Whatever you want to call that.
Whatever you want to call it, right? So for me, my experiences of supernature have been, in the jungles of the Amazon with the Shavin and partaking in ayahuasca ceremonies and just going to a whole nother realm, right? And in those moments and in the weeks preceding and proceeding those events of going, I just want to shed everything that is non-essential to my journey and my survival, right? Getting back to food, shelter, water, warmth. And it's been interesting as well since moving to the States, although we haven't been doing new warrior trainings. But every new warrior training I've witnessed men go through those transformations. I myself feel a growing divide between the non-essentials in life. And I witness it in other men. And recently I was speaking with my girlfriend, and we both agreed that, we want to unsubscribe from the American dream.
Yeah.
We want to unsubscribe from this traditional expectation of success and survival, and just separate from it to know that, hey, like, what are the bare essentials for us to live a fulfilling and happy life?
Me too. I want to unsubscribe. I mean, obviously I teach history of thought, so I think thought is important, and I think that education is important, and civilization is a really powerful, beautiful, in some ways, expression of the sophisticated primates that we are.
Yeah.
At the same time, your question about, is initiation even relevant anymore in this changed environment of hyper civilization, and that has detached from spirit and is just about stuff, or about power and systems, while we're alive here, and here is the only here there is.
Yeah.
The answer, my answer to your question is yes, it is still important. It's obvious that people are not getting initiated, because the behavior, in my view, it's difficult for me at 73. I mean, all older people talk like this, I guess every generation there ever has been, but it looks to me like things are shallowing.
Oh my goodness.
And at the very same time that the part of the American dream, for example, that is about stuff, is deteriorating. I mean, people your generation, certainly my daughter, realize viscerally that the material future for them is not likely to be what it was, what it is for my generation.
Sure.
And my generation, for the most part, does not have the stuff or the resources, in a sense, that my parents did. So but whatever, the fact remains that in my view, however we manipulate, and whatever boxes we put ourselves in alienation from spirit and nature, that doesn't stop the instinctual needs or the instinctual push. There's still in all of us the felt need for genuine initiation.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do we recreate the environment, at least for short periods of time? I know this is part of the Mankind Project goal too. Recreate, to the extent that we can, the environment in which there is this existential coming up against ourselves, each other, nature.
So I would argue that it is. It's just the game has changed. It was checkers, now it's chess. Like, look at the environment around us. So socially disconnected. We've got, apps like TikTok that have been designed specifically to mess with your brain chemistry, specifically to deplete your feel-good hormones every time you swipe, right? We also live in an express culture where food can be delivered, your laundry can be delivered. If you want something, Amazon delivers it the next day. Now, I'm not totally subscribed in that kids don't need to be playing video games and blah, they need to be out there playing with sticks. Well, yeah, both and, because we are continually evolving, right? Both and. Yet, my feeling is the environment we have today, there seems to be this big call for connection. Why all of a sudden is the men's movement? Well, I know there's many, and there's certainly a couple that I don't subscribe to, but why are we talking about manhood and masculinity now more than ever, right? Why are we having so many social revolutions happening left and right, with trans rights. We've got the Black Lives Matter movement. We've got Me Too. We've got all these things bubbling to the surface now. And I have a feeling that it's because there is the external environment around us is forcing the need.
Yeah, I think that related to what you just said, I think that one thing, I mean, there are many positives to civilizations, okay, and many positives actually to postmodern civilization, which is what we're really talking about when we talk about the relativization of patriarchy and the rise of these various movements for empowerment of minorities and the oppressed. There's something about postmodern civilization that however reluctantly opens the gates for that. That's all good. That could not happen in primal societies.
Yeah, it's like the yuppie era in the 80s, I think, was a big push for the men's movement. Then was just the immense excess that was occurring. Right.
Yeah. So I think that and I want to get back to the initiation question, but I think that one of the things that Robert and I do stress in the book and the 4 subsequent books is that there has to be for each man a defeat of the hero consciousness, that I can go out there and I can conquer the world and I can control others and nature, and I can fight the battle for light against the darkness.
Yeah,
that is important, and that's what civilization is built on. But the hero mentality has to die for maturity to happen. Why? Because it's great to flex your muscles, spiritual and physical, and it's a wonderful ideal to defeat the darkness. And of course, we do have to fight that fight just by virtue of being here. And at the same time, the hero dies or the heroine dies when you come to realize that we are not reducing the darkness or the evil. We are rearranging it.
Yeah.
The light quotient and the dark quotient are what we are given. It's in nature. It's in our natures.
Yeah.
And it's at that point that there's even a chance for wisdom to set in.
Wow.
And I think the full-blown initiatory scenarios that you started with, Brandon, I think part of what that was probably was the defeat of the hero. When the young would-be warrior goes out into the, if he comes back still kind of childlike and or cocky or whatever, then the walkabout or the vision quest has not worked.
Yeah.
If he comes back chastened, and only then can he realistically take his place as a provider, protector, etc. for his people in a universe that is just irrevocably darkness and light. That's the. I think one thing that related to that Western civilization in particular, but it's now more and more around the world, has this hero idea, right?
Yeah.
And it's a great thing. I wouldn't be alive today if Westerners had not been heroic about medicine, about conquering, bacteria, viruses, even as we speak, etc.
Defeating the Axis powers in the Second World War.
Right.
Yeah.
So without being heroic about what science could achieve, half of us wouldn't be here today to talk about it.
Yeah.
At the same time, and this is a genuine problem that we face, how do you continue the quest for knowledge, for civilization like the ancient warriors is an attempt to protect our people from the existential threat that nature is also. But how do you transition from and we've been enormously successful in the West, especially, and now, but the question is, what do we do with that now? How do we maintain our optimism about advancing humankind in all kinds of ways, whether it's human rights and so on, or medicine, and do something with the environment that is positive? How do we maintain that in the face of the wisdom that comes with the knowledge that we will not reduce evil?
Yeah.
If you're enjoying the Mankind podcast, how about taking another step? Now, this one takes some courage, and you have it. Come check out the Men's Work Introduction. It's 3 sessions over 3 weeks. New sessions start every month where you can join other men on the path. Go to bit.ly/menswork1.
What I really enjoy about what you're sharing is it's sparking the geek in me, because it's Star Wars. There cannot be light without the dark. There can't be dark without the light. It seems like we have a lot of heroes these days that are on a mission to eliminate the darkness, right? If through whatever means it seems sometimes, at whatever cost it seems.
Right.
But what I have been learning over the past couple of years, kind of like about the hero, call it the complex, really, for me, was putting on the cape and trying to save the day, was it was very much a me focus. Those endeavors, the missions, the energy behind it was a me focus and me being the hero. But when I, went through those series of ayahuasca ceremonies, when I went through my initiation at the Mankind Project, my focus shifted from the me to the we.
Yeah.
Right. It was no longer about me winning the day. It was, how do we find fulfillment and meaning in life? The focus shifted. It's where I gained a cleaner relationship with the warrior inside of me. He no longer was a mercenary. He was
right.
He became so much more wholesome in his energies. So I appreciate what you're saying in that, looking at the environment today, right, that there is as much need for these initiations as there ever has been throughout history.
Because our nature doesn't change. Human nature is, at least as long as there's been Homo sapiens sapiens, for at least 250,000 years, something like that. Well, actually, maybe 60,000 years, but modern humans, more or less.
Sure.
For however long we've been here, we are what we are. I mean, the reason we keep facing the same stuff, and history repeats itself both in our personal lives and collective lives, is that we don't change. This is our wiring.
We still have an amygdala.
Right.
Pulling the strings of our emotions. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Limbic system, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
We are Tesla chimpanzees, in my view. And we have the whole suite of higher primate behaviors, all guided by them too, the archetypes, and we're stuck with ourselves. But this is a real question, though, that you're asking: how, in a changed environment, do we come up against the existential reality, drop in the face of that, and with elders guiding us, drop the childish, heroic mentality and adopt the mature, the mature leader, warrior, thinker, magician, scrutinizer, x-rayer, and lover.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a problem. And I know that the Mankind Project has done its best, really,
Yeah.
to try to, even if it's mostly for a weekend, right? 48 hours to reintroduce boys, men, into something approximating that primal environment. But then wonderful things happen, but then they're immediately out of that and back, on Wall Street or whatever.
Yes, because I tell you what, I feel like these weekends can feel like sandbox environments where I can really play around with all those different energies: king, warrior, magician, lover, right? Yeah. Father energy, mother energy, and really play around with those different parts of my psyche and turn up in different ways through different processes, and then come off that weekend feeling like I've never felt more full and wholesome. And then come Tuesday, it's like, okay, cool, go take out the trash.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And yeah, I don't know what the solution to that is. Groups are an attempt to keep that going. Unfortunately, if groups last long enough, I'm afraid they begin to tend toward being
echo chambers,
clubs, social clubs.
Yeah. In my experience, they become echo chambers.
Yeah. Echo chambers. And then eventually it's these old guys sitting around having coffee and just talking the day to day. It's if we don't live, and believe me, I'm not romantic about the hunter-gatherer days.
Sure. People don't necessarily realize like how horrific a circumstance it is to be a hunter-gatherer, and disease and mortality and like it's all fantasized about, but really.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm sorry to cut you off from your train of thought there. Perhaps the solution isn't definitive, and it's continually moving. Like the needle is moving, and I don't know if anyone necessarily has a definitive answer to what it is at any point. However, and even as arguably the world's largest, non-profit supporting men, 70,000 men initiated. We've been around 35, 36 years, right? Many people in the organization think it should be 1 million at this point. However, you can't quantify the ripple effect of
you can't.
An I group or a new warrior training for one man. I mean, I can tell you right now, I didn't have a relationship with my father from about the age of 3 to the age of 9. And then he did his weekend in 2002. And to this day, that man is my best friend. Eventually I got into the work, not when he wanted me to, of course, when it was time, when it was time for me to get into the work.
When you were ready. Yeah.
And I've had 20 plus men close to me initiated into that work, men that were testing branches to hang a noose over, the ripple, you just don't know so much what the ripple is going to be. And I think trying to quantify that isn't helpful. In fact, it helps me go into hero mode when I'm trying to quantify, I need to have this many people come to an initiation weekend. I need to attend this many. No, it puts me into that kind of childlike warrior mode instead of into more being present with the initiative alone.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I had a mission from the time that I can remember to make the world a better place. And that powered so much of my life.
And how much of your self-worth was tied to that mission?
Well, a fair amount, not all of it, but a fair amount. Yeah.
Same right here.
And yeah, and I was forced to painfully learn that that is not going to happen. The world is not going to become a better place en masse.
Yeah.
It's not. Whether you have 7,000 or 70,000 or 70 million, it's still not enough. And the individuals and everything, nothing depends. Well, I shouldn't say that. To some extent, it's dependent on numbers, but what it's to make the world a better place. But what it's really dependent upon, and I know this sounds kind of cliched, is the depth and thoroughness with which each individual man has been aided in coming face to face with the existential reality of himself, of the world. It's one by one. And I had to learn that both in terms of men's work, but also in terms of my pastoring and then my spiritual work and teaching, that again, it's a cliche, but it's the mission is not to the total human population per se. Yeah. The mission is to this person and that person and this person and that person.
Thank you. I mean, to me, and it is, if I can give 5% more than I take, which, believe it or not, is a huge ask.
Yeah.
Got paper on my desk, right? You know, it can be very wasteful, but it's just 5% more than I take. And if I can encourage that message with those around me, but let go of the control process for them, who knows what impact that ripple is going to have. I mean, we see these humongous organizations, right? You can't measure impact in my judgment, because you can have a small nonprofit here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, changing the lives of a community, right? An urban community, having greater impact than the president of the United States could ever have on them in the long run.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, for me, you know, I go to Viktor Frankl, right? Finding that meaning, how to live a meaningful life, and using this work as a conduit to enacting that.
Right.
Instead of making it this giant macro mission that more than anything will just remind me of what I haven't achieved 24/7. Right?
Yeah, right. What you haven't achieved, and what actually, and when we reach the point where we realize it is not going to be achieved, not by you, not by me, not by anybody ever.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
Probably. If that does occur, the world becomes a better place. It will have to be through forces and individuals that are far beyond anything we can control or maybe even envision.
Yeah.
Because we're up against human nature. And while we have a suite of behaviors and potentials, all the way from murderous to genocidal, chimpanzees do that.
Oh, yeah.
All the way to deeply empathic and caring, even for those who are not able to contribute, even for other species. Chimpanzees and bonobos do that too. So it's not a matter of changing human nature, which can't be changed.
Can't be controlled.
It's a matter, I think, of encouraging each individual to the extent that we can, ourselves included, and perhaps first, to not reject the darker aspects of our chimpanzee natures, but but because rejection or repression doesn't work, but to encourage and nurture and do what we can to grow the more humane impulses and suite of feelings that we also as primates have inherited. I don't want to get biblical here, and I don't mean anything for those who aren't interested in biblical stuff, but Jesus said 2,000 years ago, the way to the kingdom of heaven is through the narrow gate, one at a time. The masses take the broad road to perdition, to lostness. Was true 2,000 years ago. It's true today. It will, in my view, always be true. Yeah. So it's the one at a time, and that gate is the gate of initiation.
Yes, beautiful way to circle it back. It's the individual journey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. I have a close friend here in Tennessee, and very well-known hunter and fisherman, and you know, just he would talk about his kids when they were young and how they would graduate from a wooden knife to a blunt metal knife, and to one with a little bit of an edge, and then eventually to one that just straight through paper.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just those little initiations that he set up for his kids. And interestingly enough, when the time came to leave the nest, they've just flown to the furthest parts of the world. They were
ready. Yeah.
They were ready. And now they're on their own journeys because he set that up for them and guided them through that to where they got their own calling to their own hero's journey, right? They had those initiations which taught them that. And I feel like, you know, not to say there isn't an absence of initiation for women in the world, but, you know, I know for a lot of women, it's, you know, entering into their first menstrual cycle, right? It's giving birth to children for some that choose or don't choose, right? Who go down that path, right? Those are initiations. But for us, you know, for us, I definitely see that we've been very disconnected from those individual journeys. There are these are I would guess that what you're describing, the graduating to the sharper and sharper knife thing, meaning you're moving from boyhood to taking responsibility for life and death, delivering, you know, life or death to another creature. And of course, it's kind of a natural progression in a way. And when you're talking about women's first menstrual cycles and giving birth and so on, those are natural initiations. What the human being seems to, and they're important, what the human being seems to require, though, to gain wisdom, humaneness, strength in humaneness, but you know, it is an intentional process. You know, so I agree with you that there are these natural initiatory points. And going back to something you said very early in our conversation about fraternities and so forth, gangs, there is an attempt being made there to initiate, but it's more often more for the sadistically motivated than it is, certainly not consciously intended to turn a boy into a man. I mean, maybe some of the gang stuff is sort of, but very loose definition of a man.
Yeah, very loose definition. Yeah, certainly the fraternity stuff, not. They are clubs. They are not particularly more mature individuals when they've come out the other end of the quote unquote initiation, if they survive it. Yeah, I mean, I think what the Mankind Project is still trying to do is do intentional initiatory processes, right? They're trying to enhance nature. And because human beings are enhanced nature, whether we want to be or not, we need more than the natural processes. We do need intentional enhanced initiations. Like what would the equivalent really be in civilization to walkabouts and vision quests?
It's really hard to draw any comparison.
I don't know what they would be.
As a young teenager, well, and these aren't
Something's happened to your sound, Brandon.
Oh, what? Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can hear you again. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't think there is a comparable experience other than perhaps getting your first house. But there is no comparison, right? But what we see and what was presented to me as a young boy was hooking up with girls, getting laid for the first time. It was,
again, those are natural, though. They're not enhanced.
Not enhanced. Exactly. So I don't think there is a comparison. Not at least one that's widely used.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem. I do. How do you, we talked about this earlier, how do you take an environment which is consciously, semi-consciously, or unconsciously intending to protect us from nature?
Yeah.
And yet we cannot become men without a natural environment that, because of our consciousness and so forth, we have to introduce into which we have to introduce an intentional initiation. Again, because we're the creatures that are both natural and supernatural, in my view. So we have to take the natural and soup it up, make it spiritual. Walkabout is certainly spiritual.
Yes.
It's not just about, I don't know what they do out there, but for 2 weeks, but whatever they do, there's a spiritual component.
Massive. Yeah.
And whatever you were doing in the jungle, by the way, I'm glad you came back. I had a friend, an entomologist, who went to the Amazon, was never heard from again.
Wow. Oh gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. Wow.
Yeah.
There's
Mike
definitely
is resting somewhere. Maybe he went native, or maybe he got eaten, or maybe something bit him. I don't know, but he never showed up again. Anyway, that's beside the point.
Yeah.
This is a genuine problem that you're wrestling with. I really think so.
Yeah. And no, you're not wrong. And as me and my partner, prepare to welcome life into the world.
Oh.
And as we
is that happening?
Oh, well, it's the preemptive actions are happening.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But as our psyches begin to shift towards less of us, just the two, and introducing more life into the world, we're starting to really look at the environment that our children are going to be exposed to.
Yeah.
And how can we not control or cushion the journey, but how can we expose them as much to that the supernatural, right? Mm-hmm. To supernature, to those little rites of passage. And shout out to organizations like oh my gosh, why am I having a mental blank right now? Boys to Men. Oh my goodness, Boys to Men, of course, having a humongous impact on the lives of young boys and the men that are facilitating them through their initiation and their rite of passage weekend.
Yeah.
This needs to be happening, in my judgment, to create well-rounded, empathetic, but also assertive, right? Human beings.
Right.
Those that can inhabit all of the different archetypes. They can have the the empathy and compassion and wholeness of the lover, and the intellect and the creativeness and the healing abilities, right, of the magician and the king that can see and have the vision to, point out that next mountain that's going to be climbed. And of course, the warrior that gets it done in a clean way with a sharp sword that isn't just bludgeoning everyone around it.
Right.
That's my hope for our children, is that we can expose them to all the various types and all the various
I think they will be, just by being human beings, they will be exposed to the power and structures of there are many more archetypes than the four that Robert and I regard as foundational. But there, people, your kids, our daughter, etc. Everybody gets exposed, but they get if they get exposed to the which they do largely, to the immature forms or the shadow forms of the archetypes, and have little experience, and in some cases none, of the archetypes in their fullness or matured, then that's the task, right? Is to try. We're all going to be exposed to the archetypes, which are inbuilt, wired in, whatever, to human nature.
Yes.
Unfortunately, again, without some form of intentional rites of passage that relativize and heal the bipolar shadows or the immature forms of the archetypes, without a process that does that and lifts up and exemplifies and helps us internalize what it would be like to be in an intimate relationship with the mature form of the archetypes. That's the problem. Is your kids will be exposed to the archetypes. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
The question is,
do I model it?
Do they get? Because tyrant kings are all over the place.
Oh yeah,
all over the place. High chair tyrants are all over the place.
Yeah.
Sadistic warriors. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, savages.
All over the place.
Impotent lovers.
Trickster magicians, all over the place. From advertising to this political spin doctors to all the let's just call it misinformation or less than full information medically in the midst of a pandemic of the magician, the tricksterous magician.
So it's interesting,
et cetera.
You bring up these examples, Doug, and it's interesting. When I really started to dive into the archetypes, I had, the pieces of paper, I had drawn the triangles, and what I would do was I would take my friends, my poor friends, I get evangelical about something and I'm just like, you have to hear about this. My dad's always been like, you should have been in multi-level marketing. I'm like, no, that's not my path. But I would show the triangles and I would talk about these kind of bipolar aspects, right? Of, here's the warrior in its fullness. You have the sadist, right? And then you have the one that turns the sword inwards and the masochist and like all these different kind of things. And they would go, whoa, I can't believe that when I had this argument with my wife the other day, she was in her bipolar, in this part of the lover and I was in this part of the warrior. No wonder we couldn't communicate. We were just totally on. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, this became the lens in which I looked at my interactions with others. And I was naive in my ambition at the beginning of this interview to think that we could both talk about the importance of ritual and rites of passage and cover the archetypes with the 4 foundational archetypes. So
Yeah, we'll have to do that another time.
mate, I am chomping at the bit to have that discussion, because I want to just say, Doug, the work that you and Robert did on this book has it charted my journey up until now. And
I'm so happy. I'm so happy to hear that has happened for you.
Oh, mate, mine and many, many others. This book is a giant in the space, and the work that you've committed to me, when I think of legacy, mate, ticking the boxes. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
So there you have it. Another powerful interview on the Mankind podcast. Grateful for Doug Gillette to share his time with us and to share his wisdom from his just decades of work. It's so powerful that a book that was released 30 years ago is so pertinent today. In fact, perhaps more pertinent in the time that we live in. So I just find it amazing that these books and resources and, all the effort that went into something so long ago can still continue to impact the lives of many today. So grateful to him and to Robert and the work that they've done in their lives, and that we get to pass it on now. So I recommend that you check out King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. We're going to have it linked in the show notes, as well as his other writings. I don't know. I wonder if I almost want to start a GoFundMe or something in which we can find the King within, Lover within, Magician, right? And get them transcribed into like ebook or into audiobook. I don't know. Just planting that seed. Perhaps someone out there has the ability to do this. So I hope you have enjoyed this interview. We have a big one coming up, episode 50. We got a dude that is leaving such a powerful impact on this world, that's using his platform as a celebrity to touch the hearts and minds of men and boys all over the world. And we're excited to bring him to you in episode 50 next week. But for those that have joined us today, I'm grateful for your time, always grateful for your support, and sending a lot of love to you out there for this Thanksgiving. And as we celebrate Thanksgiving this week, I hope you can take some time to consider the First Nations people, the original custodians of this land. I hope you can consider that perhaps this holiday isn't so much a celebration for them as we choose to look at it. And so I encourage you to check out, I'm going to post a link in the show notes of a website that you can find out who the native people were in your area. In your area. And learn a little something about them, about their culture for this Thanksgiving. Just thought I would leave that with you. So for those of you that are going to travel to see your families, spread that love, spread that thanks, surround yourself with your loved ones, and stay healthy. Happy Thanksgiving. Lots of love. See you next week. This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. I have been your host, Brandon Clift, and I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. Special thanks, of course, goes to my incredible team, Marketing and Communications Director Boyson Hodgson, producer and editor of this episode, Michael Russo, who makes me sound so much more intelligent than I actually am, so of course, special kudos goes there. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.